today is a Rhody Flatwing. It was a pattern that was showed to me by Captain Eric Thomas, and it was showed to him by a good friend and mentor, Bill Peabody. And essentially what it is a raised fly with a couple of different colors in it, with a strung saddle in olive tied flat on the shank of the hook. You can almost see how it projects a large profile from underneath with not too much material. So let's go ahead and start that fly. I'm using a 1/0 Eagle Claw 254 SS, and I'm tying with a clear mono thread because I like to keep the head of the fly kind of small. And we'll go ahead and tie that thread in, advance it back to about the hook point with some white bucktail. Go ahead and cut off about, a halfway decent pile there, say about 20 or 30 strands of white. Clean your hair, and I want this to extend off the back of the hook about 1.5 shanks to 2 shank lengths back. And we'll go ahead and tie that in just above the hook point. Now go ahead and use your thumb, distribute that hair around the shank of the hook. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come in and tie in a nice piece of saddle. I like a wide webby feather for this, and we're going to go ahead and leave some of the fluff, the marabou, at the end of the feather there, and we're going to peel some of it back, but we want to leave a little bit towards where the feather begins. And we're going to go ahead and lay that right on top, nice and flat, using our thumb to hold it in place, and put a few wraps of thread there, loose wraps. And we'll come in holding the feather in the stem, and we'll kind of roll that feather and get it right where we want it, so it's laying flat and it's straight. That is key. Go ahead and trim that stem off once we get it where we want it, and tie it down. At this point here, I like to tie in some gold flashabou. And for a more extensive list of the materials we're using in the flies, you can reference our library of materials at the saltwateredge.com. But go ahead and tie this gold flashabou in, allowing it to extend just past the feather in the back. And I like to go ahead and trim off our dead ends of flash here, leaving the flash again extending past the feather, that gold flashabou. At this point here, we're going to tie in some Pearl Bill's body braid. We're going to tie it so it's right above the hook point on top of the flash and the feather that we've tied in already. And we're going to go ahead and advance our thread towards the eye of the hook. Now what we're going to do is we're going to palmer this body braid tightly towards the eye of the hook, making sure that we don't catch any flash on the way towards the eye of the hook, and we leave about 1/8 of an inch gap at the front of the eye, or towards the eye of the hook rather, for our material that we're going to tie in next. We don't want to generate a big bulky head there, so we'll go ahead and leave a little bit of bare hook. Save that because it's going to be good for another fly if it's got any length to it. Go ahead and secure that material, that body braid that you've wrapped up forward, and now we're going to tie in some white bucktail. Again, we're going to use very little hair. We're trying to generate a big pattern with less material, so I like to put in a little base of white here on top. And you want this to extend about a shank length behind the bend of the hook over the feather. So go ahead and tie that white bucktail right on top. Now come in with your thumb and disperse the material evenly on the shank of the hook. You can even use a bodkin to aid in getting the white bucktail to open up. That looks pretty good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to tie in a few strands of pearl crystal flash. I like to use about 2 strands here, 2 full-length strands, and what I will do is I'll find about the halfway point, cut them, and take both piles that you now have in your hands and wrap them around the thread and tie them right on top. And this will allow the flash to just basically extend past the white bucktail that you've tied in. I already have some olive, yellow, and blue bucktail pre-mixed. I like to pre-mix it before tying the fly, and go ahead and clean that out. I'm going to tie this in right on top. So again, sparse on this. We don't want to go too heavy. And you want this to extend just beyond the white, almost even with the white hair that you've tied in just prior to putting this on. And go ahead and tie that down. And we're going to come in with our thumb again. We're going to try to push this material around a little bit. We want it to wrap around the shank of the hook and blend with that white we've tied in. That looks pretty good. Once you're happy with it, put a few more wraps there, and we're going to invert the hook here. We're going to put our throat on. I like to use calf tail. It's a lot easier to use, and it's less wasteful than using the tips of a bucktail. So go ahead and grab a fairly decent clump of the white calf tail, and I like this to extend just to about the inside of the bend. So what we'll do is we'll find the length we like and we'll tie it right in. That looks pretty good. Go ahead and use your thumb again to distribute the material around the shank of the hook. We want it to marry up with the bucktail that we tied in on top, kind of cloaking the body braid we tied in earlier. Now to finish the fly, I like to use peacock herl, about 4 or 5 strands. Nice long peacock herl, and you want this to extend just short of the feather. The feather is going to be the longest part of your fly. Go ahead and tie those in right on top. And once you do that, you can, while still holding that material, come in with your scissors and using the back side of them, kind of just curl it back. And that looks pretty good. We're going to go ahead and whip finish this fly. So we're now done tying. And we'll apply a little bit of head cement to secure the thread. And we're done. It looks good. Very effective pattern. And that is the traditional Rhody Flatwing.